Today, our webinar is a hands-on live webinar for Delphi 10, focusing on Windows and web. And in particular, as you can see on the screen at the moment, we're going to be talking about some of the TMS frameworks. So it's quite central to a particular supplier. There are other suppliers of different components, but today we're going to be focusing on some of the things from TMS and also some books, newly released books for Delphi. And the person that's going to be presenting today is Dr. Holger Flick from Flick Software, who I think he can introduce himself and tell us what his background is. So, hello, Holger.
Hi, Ian. How are you doing? Thank you for stepping in, and we still have the opportunity to do these webinars. You know, it's great. I'm very thankful for the opportunity. And
so I'm still a rookie.
It gives me the opportunity to show that Delphi is modern. Delphi can do anything you want to do nowadays, because we all know that there's quite a few people out there who think that Delphi is still around, but new technologies are difficult to do. And that was actually the reason why we at TMS had this idea with the hands-on book series and the process to present examples with Delphi. And because obviously, as I'm also the evangelist for TMS software, it only makes sense to use their components at the center or at the core of all that. But a little bit more to my person, maybe. I've been using Delphi since 1996. I actually grew up with Delphi and have been part of the community ever since. And well, after studying computer science, Delphi has ever been a constant part of my programming experience. And the reason for, I don't know, I think we jump right in with the motivation for the books, because
yeah, I mean, what made you do them? There's a lot of books out there.
Yeah, the number one reason is when I started in the Delphi community, being more present, because at first I wasn't able to travel, obviously, because I was a student in high school, so I didn't have a car or anything like that. But when I started speaking at conferences, there was books from Kerry Jensen, Marco Cantu, but people were saying like, hey, there's so much more books in the Microsoft community. And it has been a constant wish from people that listen to my tutorials or seminars to write books. And back in 2017, I visited Bruno Ferens in Belgium in the offices from TMS Software. And he, by the way, I have a huge echo in the background, so it's a little bit tough speaking. Oh, it's gone now, perfect. So I visited him in person, and he showed me like an alpha or candidate of TMS Web Core. And when I drove home, Belgium is pretty close to Germany. When I drove home back then, I made it up in my mind, this deserves a book. And that's how we got started. We wrote 2 books about TMS Web Core. And TMS Web Core, a lot of people don't even know what it is at first, but TMS Web Core gives you the ability to write web applications with Delphi. And the key was, a lot of people said to me, hey, Holger, there's not enough books in the German language. So the first part was, it was a book that was written in German and then later on translated into English as well. And it is a book about the framework, which gives you all the basics that you need to have in order to write web applications with Delphi. And then it also digs deep into all the different application types that you can develop with TMS Web Core. And the key of TMS Web Core is that it is based on a transpiler that compiles your Delphi application into JavaScript. And that is the key here. You will get in the end a application that only consists of HTML and JavaScript. So you won't have any server that you need to start or something like that. You can deploy this to any web server that you want to deploy it to. And the key for me was, and I put this slide right here, that it has lots of source code that is easy to read, lots of explanations for the source code, and that you're also able to see when reading the book what the outcome is going to be. And the TMS Web Core book really goes from step-by-step creation of the first application, goes over to progressive web applications that allow you to use web applications offline on your mobile phone. It allows you to build Electron applications, which are cross-platform desktop applications, meaning to the end user, it doesn't seem like a web application. It seems to be like a desktop application. I did a couple of tests here in the States, because here in the States, QuickBooks is a popular product for accounting and bookkeeping. And a lot of people don't realize that is a web application and it's built on the same framework. But it seems like you're using it like a desktop application. And you can offer these kind of applications on Windows, Mac, and Linux as if it were a native application.
I have to say, I mean, I use QuickBooks myself, and I didn't actually know it was a web application.
It is.
You know, it's pretty transparent. I mean, the thing works like a normal desktop app, and I think this is, you know, like yourself, I'm a big fan of TMS Web Core, and the thing that I always get if I demonstrate to anybody, you know, Web Core is they can't believe that it can suddenly write Delphi, and it's almost pure Delphi, hit a button and out comes a web app, and it literally is a bunch of HTML pages and CSS and one or two JavaScript files, and the thing just works. It's pretty impressive, really.
And what's so nice about that it's JavaScript is you can also use JavaScript functionality inside of your web application, inside of Delphi, which is also being described in the book. You know, so that is not a limitation. It's actually something that makes it better. And if you want to use databases, you need to have a web service, because as I just explained, you have your web application, which is HTML and JavaScript. You can't connect directly to a database, so you connect to another web resource. And the web service is what gives you access to web resources like databases using a URL. And this book, of course, focuses on TMS X Data, which is their primary web service product. And the nice thing about TMS Web Core is, as TMS is so ever present in the Delphi community since Delphi 1, they implemented the T dataset functionality, meaning you can use these web service functionality using the controls that you've been using since Delphi 1. You have a T dataset, you have a T data source, you have your TDB grid, you have your TDB edit, and in the framework does the work for you. So if you want to apply your changes to the database, it's a method call, which is actually called apply changes. And that makes the whole concept of TMS Web Core with the other applications from the toolbox so valuable. And of course, it allows responsive web design, and you have actually many options how you design your app. For example, I know customers that have web design and they need to write applications for an existing web design, and the web designer is actually always scared how to include the functionality in the web design. And TMS Web Core actually offers the option, I'm going to show an example for that if we have the time, that you can add your applications to existing web pages without touching the web page if you don't want to. You just have to communicate with the web designer that he or she basically gives you the hooks for the button click, that you know how the button is called that is being clicked. That is all that you need to know. And then you can do your application logic.
Oh, so the web designer is using the kind of tools and the technology that they're used to. So they're editing their HTML and laying out the CSS the way they want. But meanwhile, in the background, you as the developer is just running Delphi code in the IDE, and off you go. I think that's really, in terms of separation of concerns, and also, you know, a modern idea of saying, oh, well, this person will be responsible for this area, and the programmer is responsible for that area. I think this is one of the great things about this particular tool. So,
and the best thing is that TMS, yet again, because they're there since Delphi 1, they applied it to Delphi concepts that we all know. So they actually built an action list for TMS Web Core. So you can use a concept that you've been using for years in the web, you know? And the final chapter is something where you get a whole example, like you build a web service, you build a database, you show stuff on a Google map. And here you see the example that you built. I'm located in Florida, in Fort Myers, and my wife's a teacher, and they have a database where all the schools in the Lee County district are located. So you learn how to build a web service in the final chapter that gives all the coordinates for the schools, and will build a web client that places those little icons on the map. And there's also an example that uses student numbers and uses charting to display it on. It's all described step by step. And I had pretty good feedback from customers that they finally were able to build a web service based on a database, and then were able to use that in a web application successfully. And that was a pretty good feeling that we got, that the final chapter was actually the one that was pointed out by everybody. And that led to the idea to just do a book with examples only. So that was the idea we had. And
right, sure. Okay.
And
so are both books like that, or have I misunderstood?
So the TMS Web Core book is only about TMS Web Core. It's
okay. Yeah.
It's basics TMS Web Core, how to use it with all the technologies that are included. And the hands-on gives you a span on, as it says here, web desktop clients, which means VCL, FireMonkey, REST servers, and building reporting using other solutions. And so you learn how to write a web service for a database with over 8 million records, and then you design a VCL application, FireMonkey application, you deploy it to Mac, you deploy it to mobile, you learn all of that. You implement a reporting service, meaning on the web service side, a report is generated, which is produced as PDF, and then the client application is able to show it in the browser as a PDF, where you can make annotations and stuff like that. So this is all hands-on and practical, and not as much theory as the other book, where it's like, here, this is this component, it has that functionality. In that book, it's more tuned to real-world examples. You learn how to add users and tokens for security and authorization to your web service. You learn how to build a vector-based user interface with Delphi, meaning that it is safe to use with any display resolution. And what I try to do is I always try to give a little bit of background to the topic area, and also provide links on the internet where you can find more. For example, HiDPI itself is a book by itself, but if I get people started, hey, this is like what you need to consider with HiDPI, these are the controls that you can use, and basically show an example with vector images that can be used on any resolution and are always sharp compared to bitmap images, that is the approach for the book. And you even learn how to encrypt data, and all the examples in the VCL will also use parallel programming, so you have no lag and blocking effects on your user interface. And another thing,
it's kind of like a broad brush. Then it's going, you're covering quite a few different techniques and sections, I think, there. Parallel programming, encryption.
Exactly. And I want to show the hands-on example so people really see what the idea behind that is. Just quickly, it's exclusively distributed on Amazon, and these are the stores. The slides are going to be available to all attendees. I will also make it available for download on my blog. So US, Canada, UK, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and Japan, these are the stores. And for example, if you're in Australia, you have to pick one of those and ship it. And the problem is right now, because of COVID-19, there's restrictions. For example, usually when you're in Belgium, you would use the store in Germany, but a couple of weeks ago that wasn't possible because Germany didn't export to Belgium because of the current situation. But that will be lifted at some point, and then you will be able to get the book worldwide. So I just wanted to point that out, that all the problems that occurred with ordering are only there because of the current restrictions.
Well, I mean, the world is very weird at the moment anyway.
Yeah,
I think half the people are working from home, the other half of people can't remember where home is, and most people are not quite sure what day it is. Is it Saturday the 3rd or the 3rd Saturday again, or is it Saturday?
Yes, so I wished a colleague the other Tuesday had a good weekend, you know, so that's basically.
Yeah, I think we're all at that stage.
how things turn out right now. So here you see in Delphi, the project group, which comprises the source for the hands-on book. And first you download a real database from the internet. It's here in Florida, we have public government, and they publish the registry of all the registered entities inside of the state. So you can download a database of all the companies registered in the state of Florida or that have been registered. So this database contains 8.5 million records. And it's a text format, which we have to convert to comma-separated values in order to import it into the database. In the book, I used MySQL, but of course you can use any relational database if you know how to use it. And the first step is to convert and prepare the data to make it importable into the database. And that is actually the first project. You learn how to build a VCL application that imports the data into the database. And we show like a simple edit field where you have an additional button that you can click to select a folder and all that stuff that is considered improved user accessibility. And then you immediately start to build your first web service that offers functionality from the database inside any client that you want to use. And I'm going to start this because I want to show that we build it step by step. So the thing is that we also try to build a user interface for the server that you see where it runs, and then you also add, for example, if I click this away now, it doesn't really close, it's still here. So you also learn how to build fancy stuff like a tray icon. So it's not only that the book describes how to use TMS controls, it also describes how you can make Delphi the tool of choice to get all the stuff done using these controls, but still use the functionality that's provided in the VCL and other controls. And this is the server, and the server is built step by step. I won't basically jump into the book and simply explain all these things that are in there. You will learn to build these step by step. And the first example that I included and that I wanted to show everybody is a web application that I built with TMS Web Core. And this web application uses the web service. And here, the service info button, I added this for presentation purposes because it shows you information about the backend that is hidden, obviously, if you use the web service. And here you see that the approximate total number of records is 8.5 million. I limited the lookup results here in this grid to 25. As a reporting engine, I use TMS Flexel, and as a database engine, this is all generated using SQL on the back end, MySQL Community Server version 8. And a lot of people always say, oh, web services are too slow, I need a direct database connection. This technology is nothing we can use in our company. And let me just show you, when I type my company name here, you see this list is being populated while I type. So there's really no delay while typing.
So that's reading through 8.8 million records or something like that?
Yes, that is basically a live view, a live request from 8.5 million records. And if somebody tells me, hey, web services are slow, I can only say, your database is slow, or you're not using the database correctly. So the key is you need to define a key, an index, of course, in your database, and you need to make sure that your web service uses that index when you make the request.
I mean, I think what you're saying there is that if you've implemented a back end that's slow in terms of queries, and you've not got the right keys, and the queries are badly written, then nothing is going to make it go any quicker than it can go. But as long as you've done the back end part of it, the bit that shouldn't actually get in the way is the thing that traditionally gets in the way, which is the connection between the client and the server.
Yeah, so I see a question right here. Is this a local database? No, it's actually a database that's hosted in, it's right here. It's a MySQL database, which is on another server. So it's not local. It's it's accessed using LAN is the term. You know, it's not over the internet, but it's
it's a LAN connection, but it's not actually on the same machine.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the scenario that you would usually have, because you would have your web server, and on that web server you would most likely have in the same LAN the database server. You know, so that is exact, and this is why I called this book hands-on. This is an example like you would use it in reality. Customers or businesses are not interested in demonstrations that use like 5 records, 10 records. You want real examples, and that's exactly what this hands-on series is tied to. You get an example where you screw up, you're gonna wait. You know, like if you pose a query to the web service, which you can do with Xdata, because you can, if you add your databases to the web service directly, you don't have to write it manually. You can also use, I call them in my literature the default endpoints. You can directly say use in a language based on URL in a SQL-like language that you enter into the URL. You can actually request data from the tables directly. And if you make a mistake, for example, if you use a filter, for example, if you say, okay, not the company name, which is indexed obviously in the database that I use, if you, for example, filter based on the street address, and street address is not an index in the database, you wait 2 minutes. You know, because it's 8.5 million records, the database server has to look at all the records if there's no index, so you might wait a long, long time, you know? And this is what the book explains. It also tells you how to create the indexes, and all with SQL, and then you jump from SQL to the web service, how you can use the databases directly inside of the web service, or how you can write your custom methods. For example, I use a so-called lookup service, and I define basically get status. That is what I use to get the status that you just saw, how many records are in there. It uses a Delphi class, so I can show you right here. The return types, I defined that separately. And there you see, for the status item, I defined a record count, a result limit, a database engine, and a report engine. And you can use your Delphi class syntax to write the web service. And for example, the lookup service you see here, get business entity names, it gets a parameter, which is the part of the company name, and it returns, it's cut off because of the resolution, and it returns a list of business entity items, and that's also defined here. It's basically name, and of course you want the ID if you want to have follow-up requests, for example, for that company. So on the client side, it's also that easy. If you have the backend configured, if you split up the development inside of your team, you could let one person do the backend and one service do the client. It would make sense, right? And the great thing about Xdata is, because you use classes, you can use those classes in the definition of your client. You know, so let me show that to you. So web client, you have an edit field, and you have a list box. That is what I use in the web application to do this search result. And then we have here the button to get the service information and connect, which is automatic, which connects to the web service. And then you have special controls that allow you to connect to the Xdata, which is the Xdata web connection. And then you have the client, which is kind of like a data set where you can access the records. And here you see how Delphi-like it is. If you go to the object inspector, there we have the event on change. So whenever I type something and it's more than, then I do a lookup. And I do a lookup of the text that is typed in the edit field. And if we look at the implementation of do lookup, I simply call on the client the service method, and the service method is here a constant because I don't want to use the hard-coded name here, but you see that I use the name of the service. It's I lookup service get business entity names, and if you remember, if you go back to the lookup service, get business entity name, I lookup service, you see it right there. So this is no magic what we're doing there. And if we go back to the do lookup code here, the parameter is the text that has been typed in the edit control. So the whole web service call is one line of code, and the framework that is supplied by TMS does the rest for you. It resolves the URL for you. You don't have to bother what the URL is. You don't have to bother what the query is. Everything is done. And it also handles, of course, this call is asynchronous, meaning your web application isn't blocked. So when you get a reply, how do you get the reply? Delphi events. So you go to the client events, and here you have all the events to interact with your web service, like on error, what should happen if an error occurs? On load, what happens if the data is actually loaded? So you double click here, and you can see we have a response object, which gives us access to the HTTP request that has to the HTTP response, I apologize, that has been sent to us. And if the status code is 200, we know, okay, we have a valid response. And then we have two requests that we can send. We can send the status when we click the status button, or we can get the business entity request, and then I call handle name lookup. And in there, I parse the JSON result that we get, and then it's just transferring that JSON, the information, into the list box. I know this is all a little bit brief, but I want to show you as much as possible as I can in this hour. And the details, not to push the book, but the details are of course explained step by step in the book. How you parse JSON is also explained in the TMS Web Core book, of course.
Well, in fact, there's quite a few questions about what you're doing. I think some of the questions that we'll just kind of nip in the bud whilst people are asking is, people are saying, what version of Delphi does this work with? I did actually ask Bruno directly from TMS, and Bruno says it works with XE7 to 10.4, so most of the recent versions. Somebody else asked if it worked with the Community Edition version, and the answer is yes, it does. But you should bear in mind that with the Community Edition, you don't have the client server capabilities. It's essentially similar to the Professional Edition. You don't have you know, those types of data sets. And can we use a REST client or just use NNet HTTP client on TMS Web Core project to connect to a REST server?
You can use anything you want to use, because you have you have controls for HTTP. You can create the HTTP request manually if you want to. You can affect the header. The Xdata controls. By the way, Ian, you definitely need an external terminal keyboard if you want to answer questions while I'm talking.
That's not me typing.
Oh, so it must be Jim typing.
Yep, I could be.
Yeah.
Whoever it is, I've just muted their keyboard. It wasn't me. I'm a very good boy.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So you can use any HTTP control that you want to use, and that works fine. you know, and the X data controls, just there's still a keyboard typing.
Definitely not me. I'm just messaging the group and saying to them, whoever you are, stop typing.
Yeah, I don't know who it is, but yeah, so the X data controls only give you the comfort that you don't have to specify the URL, you don't have to specify anything like that. But somebody is typing like crazy, we're hearing it.
Yeah, I'm not typing, and the sound is going on, so it's definitely.
Can you mute Bruno, because I see Bruno is being shown as talking. Okay, good, perfect. So to answer the question, you can use any of the X data controls, and that helps you to get the right well, the URLs and everything. Good. Okay. Can everybody still hear me? That's the question.
Well, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Good. Okay. Good. Yeah, I must definitely be somebody was named. We apologize for that. Somebody was named as organizer, and we got the sound from a computer that wasn't muted. So yeah, I also saw a couple of other questions. So about the 8.5 million records database, and the book is written with any reader in mind that it is easy to reproduce these examples. Of course, I can't describe how to build each application in the utmost detail. So if there's like 4 buttons on the form, I won't say drop this button, drop that button. You get a picture, but only the controls that are really at the core, like how to set up the X data connection, how to set up vector images on those buttons. Those things are being put in focus. The typing is back. It's Bruno, by the way.
Sorry about this, everyone. We're just going to try and mute. It's Bruno from TMS, and Bruno has to mute himself. Okay. Yeah, we're muting. We're asking Bruno via our chat window to mute. Oh, sorry about this, everyone. Little technical glitch. These things happen.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Sorry. On you go, Holger. How's it going?
Yeah. So the examples are all made to be reproducible, but there has been some issues for some people downloading the huge database from the internet, problems with the zipping and unzipping. That led me to put a part or a tiny part of the database with about 6,000 records into the source repository as an SQL dump that you can create yourself. Of course, I had to remove all personal information. So there's no addresses in there, there's no tax IDs in there or anything. The reason for that is pretty obvious, but I still want to give everybody the opportunity to reproduce it. So the company names, of course, are public, so those are still in there, and you can create the database that way if you had problems downloading any of it. So it's really, really peaceful and quiet now in the background, and there's no echo anymore. So I think we fixed the glitches.
Fixed Bruno.
Yes, and what I would like to show next is, because people are really surprised that 8.5 million records web service. I know, I was surprised myself how well it worked if you build the backend correctly. But in the process, you will learn how to add authentication, meaning user accounts like username, password. You'll learn how to create a database that encrypts these. You will learn how to do tokens for follow-up requests, so you don't use anything that is existing already. You create your own token service, login service. And when that is done, let me start this. This is a second service that you built with authentication enabled. You will add VCL clients, you will add FireMonkey clients, you will add a user manager written on as a web client, because it has been one of the questions has always been when after writing the TMS Web Core book, is this X-data stuff just able to read? No, of course you can also write. So the user manager shows you how you can write back to the database without actually using the database. So it's all, as I explained initially, based on the T data set, T data source mechanism that's included in Delphi. And the VCL async lookup right here, that is the final project and the final chapter of the book that brings it all together, where you build a VCL application with the Embarcadero parallel library, meaning everything is synchronous. That means if I type a company name here, it is non-blocking. You see, and the grid is being populated while I type, and then I get my company right here. I can double click it, and this is the Edge browser. It's available both from Embarcadero now in 10.4 and also from TMS. And you can double click it here and you get a report, which is a PDF file, which is a signed PDF file. You learn how to sign your documents with a certificate. And this PDF is generated on the server side. And this even, let me show you the server again. You build a template in Excel, which you load as a resource into the web server, so you don't need to have this Excel template on the same computer that you run your server on. It is included in the EXE. You learn how to use resources with Delphi and all that stuff. So the book really gives you the whole chain. The only thing that is different to academic books is you learn how to do it in the process. Normally, you would, of course, get the requirements from a customer and you would build a model and you would look at all of that. The book is written in a style that you keep adding things to an existing idea or to an existing scenario. You start with, you have these companies, you look up the companies, you build the web client, and then you build a report for that company and stuff like that. And the cool thing in the browser, by the way, is you can make annotations and you can print it, you can save it. So that really gives you.
That's lovely. I like that.
So, and as you can see at the, no, actually you can't see, I have to show you. This is one control. This is the web browser control, which is also available from Embarcadero in 10.4. TMS offers it for their FNC controls as well, so you can use it in any platform, be it Mac, be it Windows, be it even whatever is supported by Delphi as target platform with a user interface. And here we have an advanced string grid. This is a toolbar, and the toolbar uses, and this is what makes Delphi so cool. In Delphi 10.3, Embarcadero added the virtual image list, which allows you to define different resolutions for your icons, so that if you are in high DPI scenarios, the VCL automatically picks the image at the correct resolution. And what is new with TMS, they offer you a advanced SVG image collection, which means you can use vector images for your toolbars, and the virtual image list then scales it automatically. And you can also add styles to your application so that it looks like you have the Office 2009, you have all these styles here, but you can also say, hey, I want to auto theme adapt, meaning the operating system determines which view you're going to use.
This is a new thing for the FNC styling, isn't it? Isn't that a new?
Yes, for the FNC.
4, I think.
Yeah, for the FNC. So in this book, I completely stayed with, except one example, I completely stayed with VCL, FireMonkey, and Web. But now for the FNC framework, you can also style FNC controls now with the latest version. It was released yesterday, if I remember correctly.
And FNC works. FNC works completely over all platforms. Is that right? Because I know if I create something with FNC, I can use exactly the same controls on a WebCore project and on a
Yes.
VCL and on a FireMonkey project. And that's one of the things that sort of, when I first saw WebCore and FNC, that was one of the things that attracted me to it, that you could essentially write code that talked to specific controls or classes of controls, but the code could target different, targets like Windows and Mac and all the rest of it, and carry on working, which I thought was, I mean, it is almost an extension of the idea of FireMonkey, but extended really to a kind of VCL concept as well.
Yes, so the FNC is really a cross-platform, cross-framework solution, because you can use the same control in each framework. It's really the same control. So if you have the toolbar control from FNC in VCL, it works the same way in FireMonkey. So you have only the learning curve for one control, and that is basically the idea with their mapping products right now. So the mapping products are now also available for the FNC framework, which can be used in the VCL FireMonkey the same way. So you don't need to rethink your properties. You don't need to think like, it's always the same properties, methods, how you use these controls. And that may be the last words to the hands-on series. That is what I'm working on right now. I'm working on their new mapping product, the FNC Maps, and that is going to be the next hands-on book where you learn how to use mapping in Delphi. And it will be, or it is, I mean, the examples are done. I'm just describing the examples. You will learn how to build VCL clients with mapping, and also macOS clients with mapping, using different mapping providers, be it Google, be it TomTom, be it open layers. So you can switch between these. And the hands-on book will first describe how you basically can use different maps in one application, how you can store settings, and the whole architecture will be explained. And then you will learn by example to put markers on a map, to calculate distances on a map. And then one big example, for example, is using the directions API to calculate costs to visit a customer. So you can now access different points of a route, distances, and use it to calculate your estimated cost. If you want to visit a customer, you can, again, will create a report with the routing information and stuff like that. So that is in the works, and will be shown in detail on German Code Rage for the first time. I have a session approved where we will show the FNC mapping in detail, and the book, I think, will be in your hands around August, September, I think. And it will also, again, I will not, sorry to, but again, I will also include a web service example. So you actually will build a scenario where you are a provider of hiking routes, and then users can, on their web application or on their VCL application, can see what kind of hiking routes you offer, and then you can download them to the client and visualize them on the client. So, and for Xdata, I show a client that delivers content from the web server without database, because a lot of people think Xdata has to be tied to a database. That is not the case. You can actually do whatever you want with Xdata. So that will be an example where you supply data that's on your computer in your network, that is content that your customers are supposed to use. So you offer them to access that data via a web service, which could be used for software patches and other kinds of information.
Oh, it sounds great. Me personally, I think the routing side of things is quite interesting, because I do some work for visiting nurses, people that go into people's homes and give them medication and change their dressings and stuff like that. And one of the things they're always talking about are things like routing, and it sounds like it might be possible to actually write some routing software that would find print out appropriate routes for the visiting nurses, and also possibly cost those routes as well, in terms of mileage and mileage rate and stuff like that. So that's interesting stuff. So we've got a lot of questions, which we want to try and finish on the hour, which gives us 10 minutes left. So we should probably try and just make sure. I think we've answered most of them as they came along. One common question is, which version of Delphi does it work with? I think I've already covered that, which is XE7 to the latest version, 10.4. And will it work with Community Edition? The answer is yes. Couple of other questions. The Xdata server that you showed going through 8 million records caused a lot of consternation. A lot of people go, "What? I can't believe it. It's incredible," really fast. So I think that sounds like a few people have got a reason to buy the book already. So that's a good thing. But Xdata is TMS technology. People are saying, can they use the Xdata backend with other types of front end other than Delphi?
Yes.
The answer that Bruno gave was yes, they can. I don't know whether you have anything to add to that, Holger.
No, it's pure JSON that is being returned, and if you don't want to return JSON, which you also learn in the book, is if you want to return your own stuff. For example, a report is a PDF file. So I do not return the PDF document encapsulated in JSON, because for me, even though PDF, strictly speaking, is PostScript, so it's text, but there is also like it's more binary PDF. So I return just the binary PDF and no JSON encapsulated inside of it. So it's pure PDF that's being returned. It manages any data type as a return value that you specify. You have full control over the return header. You can you can go down in up to the package level if you want to, because TMS has been pretty smart. Xdata is based on their Sparkle product, and their Sparkle product is everything that's HTTP or HTTPS. So you can, if you use the class hierarchy, you can go from Xdata, which does a lot of things for you. If you, for example, return a string, this string is automatically wrapped as JSON, but you are also free to go deeper into the hierarchy and return the string just as a string, basically using the Sparkle framework functionality. And
so you can basically use several approaches. I think, sorry to cut you off, one thing that I don't know whether you mentioned, maybe I didn't spot it whilst I was typing some answers, but there is a tool that comes with the TMS stuff as well, which allows you to take data sets and produce, I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but it's like TMS data modeler or something like that. And what that does will take the database and convert create some classes and decorate those classes suitable for things like Xdata as well.
Yes,
unless I've misunderstood.
Exactly, and that is the second thing I wanted to mention. Of course, they also base it on their ORM tool, Aurelius, which gives you the mapping to classes, database to class, and that is also included in Xdata. So that's why people think Xdata is tied to databases, because you have the option to include databases and you have the option to use the functionality with the query language to query databases using Xdata. But it's not tied to that at all. You can use it without databases as well. And the second reason why people think it is the wizard that was provided previously with Xdata asked you, what is your database connection? Do you want to use a native database connection? And that has been remodeled by the architect from Xdata. He no longer puts the database at center stage. If you say, hey, create an Xdata server, you get a server, and then you have your components on the data module. You can click them and say, hey, add database connection. But that is no longer the default, that it's tied to database. Let me just one word to this example here, because this is an FNC map with Google. And you saw I just entered the fake customer address, and I go from where I live to that customer, and all this data here, the distance and the minutes, and that is all extracted using the framework. So in addition to what was available before and what is available with most mapping frameworks, you now actually can access the data of the routing in classes. So you actually have a class for the routing information with like text, distance, time, And you can, if you calculate the route, you can add parameters like optimize it, going from A to B, and that kind of stuff. So that is all in there, and it's as I say in the book, it's cross framework, meaning it's VCL, FireMonkey, and it is cross platform, meaning it's Windows, Mac, Linux, and mobile, of course, iOS, Android. You have all those as well. And then it is also cross-service, meaning multiple services like TomTom, Google, and so on are supported. So it's a lot. That's why the book has taken a while, because it's a lot to describe.
Oh, yeah, well, it's one of these things where it's an ever-expanding subject as well. Someone did ask, are you going to update your book with the latest versions of TMS WebCore? I think they're trying to drive me crazy. You've just released it, and you know.
Yes, that was actually the biggest problem, getting the book up there in the first place, because I started writing in early 2018, and the guys at TMS have been developing their heart out, and it got better and better and better. And I actually had to rewrite the first chapter because there was so much more in there, that I wrote it twice, the first step-by-step example, because the first version has things differently. But at some point, you just have to call it quits and say, hey, I'm going to publish it now. The book is also not, I'm going to be pretty straightforward with that. The book is unable to be to explain all the components that are, or all the controls that are included in TMS Web Core. Honestly, why would we do that? You know, you have the reference for that, you have the documentation. The book gives you the guidance to be able to build applications, and then you can dig deeper into all the controls. The most important ones, or the ones that have the most implications for your web application, I explained in detail. But it's not a reference like the documentation where you say, hey, it's not giving you like property this does that for each of the controls. That's not the case. So the TMS Web Core book is still valid, and the hands-on book, whenever it refers to the web, is not going to repeat what's already in the TMS Web Core book. So the hands-on book will not go into great detail about the X-Data services. The X-Data services, the basics, I called it X-Data in a nutshell, is included in the TMS Web Core book. And then the hands-on book will also not explain JSON handling and stuff in detail that are already covered in the TMS Web Core book.
So there will be a more X-Data book coming then.
I have so many ideas now, like I'm also thinking about, because a lot of people don't know that FlexCell is such an excellent reporting tool. Then the data grid the grids from TMS are also excellent. So and X-Data itself is so complex that I rather explain X-Data with examples than writing the X-Data book. That is the idea, because I myself learn much better by example than learning by theory.
And I think, you know, it's like any of these things. I mean, this has sounded a bit like a sales pitch for TMS, and I understand that this is probably not the usual webinar, but that was kind of where we were coming from with this, that we were going to be talking about TMS Web Core, and with that really comes a natural progression into TMS components, but also, more importantly, the books that you've got out. A few people have asked for the links, and we'll make sure that the links are put up in an appropriate place to get the book. But as you said, it's available on Kindle Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing, and also from your own website as well. But we'll probably tweet out a link as well.
Exactly.
I think we've answered most of the questions. We're trying to keep to the 1 hour roughly, because I know Holger has someone to go to after this.
Exactly.
Right. So, yeah. So you don't want to upset them.
No, the thing is, I just wanted to point out the TMS has been a partner from Embarcadero and back in the day, and has grown with Delphi over the years, and that is the reason why it's so perfectly included into the VCL. And the books are so hands-on that you really have a solution how you can get things done. And from experience, it is better. I mean, even if I went to college and I got taught some abstract concept like polymorphism and all that kind of stuff, that night when I learned it, I was using Delphi to reproduce it myself, and that way I remembered it. And that is the intention of all my books that I write, that you have an example, and whenever you think of, oh my God, how do I use that routing from Google Maps again, and then you think of that example that you built once, and then you have it again. You know, that's the intent.
I had exactly this problem. I had to Google something the other day, and in fact, I was talking to another MVP about this. I Googled this question. The first result was actually me, a blog post that I'd written. The second result was a video webinar of me, complete with examples, telling me how to answer my own question. I'm like, oh, okay, I obviously forgot about this. And this is the problem that you get. If you write enough code, eventually it all starts to leak out of your head and things like that. I think most of the questions have been answered. Yeah. And I didn't want to... Sorry, carry on.
We could do one, two more because I see like there's one explicit question about the edge control. I wanted to point that out. TMS has two kinds of edge control. One is for the VCL, and the other one is for FNC. FNC can of course be used in any of the frameworks for any of the platforms. And how it works is if you, for example, deploy your FNC application to the iPhone. And on the iPhone, obviously, there is no Google Chrome by default. It then uses the Apple browser that is supposed to be used on the platform. It's that smart. And the control that is included in Delphi 10.4, as far as I know, it's VCL only. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that is using the same backend that Microsoft provides as a replacement for Internet Explorer.
That is exactly the case, and there's a little bit of fiddliness to go on with the edge control because that's still an evolving target themselves. For Microsoft, you know, they're releasing the new Edge and they're saying it'll be with the next version of Windows, which it is. Yeah, so I think it levels the playing field for a lot of us, really.
Yeah. So the edge control is really, one is TMS and the other one is Embarcadero, and they have been developed completely separate. There's no repackaging or any sort of that. TMS was actually a couple of weeks early because TMS, that was also a question I saw pop up. The TMS control can be used with Delphi 10.3 and Delphi 10.2 as well. So it's basically available for all the Delphi versions as well.
Right, cool. Okay. Just see, I think that's pretty much it. Will TMS Web Core now handle Delphi code
with T-Dictionary? Yeah. So T-Dictionary is available in two variants. One is generic and the other one isn't. And the generic class is of course not available yet because the as I mentioned in the beginning, the compiler, the Pass2JS compiler, which converts your Pascal code to JavaScript, does not handle generics yet. So T-Dictionary, yes, from the containers unit, but not the T-Dictionary from the system generics.collections.
I think it's worth mentioning as well because I've used TMS and Web Core for some client projects of my own. You are not going to write exactly the same code you would write for VCL or FMX and use it in a Web Core project. You mostly are, but some of the restrictions that you're going to get in Web Core are nothing to do with Web Core itself. It's to do with the fact that the code you're writing is actually then being transpiled or converted, shall we say, into JavaScript. And JavaScript has some very specific things that it does not do, pointers, for example, and things like that. And also the back-end compiler is a compiler that's not something that TMS actually write themselves. As I understand, you have some input into it, but at the end of the day, you're always going to be catching up with what that compiler can do. TMS adds an awful lot on top of that plain Pass2JS compiler, and that's the strength of the product, and that's why I like it. I love this product. That's why I'm glad I'm involved in this webinar. as I said earlier, it does sound a little bit like a sales talk, but this is not what we're doing here. We're just discussing a bunch of components that, as a Delphi programmer, which is what I am, I may be an MVP, but I am a guy that earns his daily income day in, day out by writing programs. TMS is almost a no-brainer thing to have around. And if you start doing web apps with TMS Web Core, it just raises you to another level because you're not having to write a bunch of JavaScript and or any other kind of language like that. You can carry on writing the Delphi that you use, reuse 99% of your Delphi code that you've written for other purposes, and have it coming out in the forms of a web app, which is a great thing. And it can target, Eclipse and a few other things as well. So it's a definite feather to your cap if you're not a web programmer, and allows you to interact with people who are web designers and allow them to do the HTML prettiness, shall we say, and you add the logic behind the scenes, the real work that we know is the tricky part. So yeah, good stuff.
So final question here is, there is no Kindle version. Amazon actually does not allow me to publish my book on Kindle because of the format that I use. And the PDF is also not allowed because it's exclusive to Kindle Direct Publishing, so I can't publish a PDF. And the other obvious question is, why don't you offer a Kindle version for the devices that basically work like a PDF? I tried it, but I looked into it, but there is legal implications because I sell worldwide. Different countries have different legal restrictions. For example, Germany has strict book selling restrictions with regard to price, and it's just too much of a hassle to order a digital version as well. That's the answer.
There's a British comedian that says, "What do you call a country with too many rules? Germany. What do you call a country with no rules? France."
So yeah, I can't. Yeah, that's definitely the case. But the thing is, it's not that I this book is basically, or all the books are basically written next to my regular work. There hasn't been any budget provided by a publisher to write them because I self-published them. So for that reason, I have to pick a route that allows me to sell them worldwide without me having disadvantages tax-wise, and that's the number one reason why the PDF paperback version makes sense.
Well, it's great stuff. It was an interesting webinar. If there's enough interest, we did say that we might try and convince our Embarcadero to do another one. And I think, given the amount of people who've been asking questions and the subject matter, it's a very broad subject. Maybe we can beg them nicely and say, please let us do another one, and we'll go from there. If you've got any questions, you can put them in the question window and we'll try and answer them. Get well soon to Jim. He's not dead. He's not disappeared. He's not locked in a cave somewhere. As I said at the start, he did take a tumble, banged his head, and he's got a thing called concussion syndrome, which it makes it very difficult to concentrate and things like that. And he's on the mend. He is okay, and we are in touch with him. He's not disappeared, but for a little while you may find that Jim's not his normal super responsive self to things, and you may get someone like me turning up at a few of these webinars for a while whilst he recuperates. So get well soon, Jim.
Yes,
thanks a lot, Holger. Yes. Is there anything else before we go? I think we've covered everything.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity. And yeah, we have to do TMS Web Core as a focus, the new version, another time if Embarcadero wants to. We're available for that.
There are so many people ask about it. I would say that it would be a definite thing that people should be considering, for a webinar. But what can we do? We'll just try and twist their arm a little bit.
Yes, thanks. Sorry for the technical glitch in the beginning because we had echo and keyboard typing, but we figured it out in the end.
Yeah, we got there in the end. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Holger, and thank you everyone for attending. And we'll see you all next time on one of these webinars. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Bye-bye.